that Casey Goodson, a person was seen of the gun-wielding driver. The gunman is, as Jason chases after the gunman into that house, he is screaming at the gunman. Your weapon is that this gunman, this man, the gunman never drops the weapon. As that gunman is trying to see this firearm that the gunman points, Jason sees a driver in a Nissan Versa. The driver of this, Jason again, is at the front of the intersection. As Jason is waving, hey guys, we have a gun waving a gun to that Nissan Versa with the gunman. That Jason had reported that there was a guy waving a gun. He turns the lights on. Jason turns onto Estates Place and sees the suspect's vest and rifle. He airs that the suspect, yet again, communicates with his team, that the suspect stopped. The suspect pull up to where Jason is putting his gear on. Jason tells them. The suspect gets out of the Nissan in his hand. Suspect looks at Jason, front door. All my client knows is that this suspect looks wherever. The suspect is deliberately evading. That he saw that gun in his right hand. At this point, he believes the suspect is, as a gunman is now accelerates toward the end of the street. He sees the suspect trying to get into that home. My client yells, U.S. Marshals, show me your hands. It's suspect. He hits the brakes, jumps out of the truck, and sees the suspect, but he cannot see the suspect's hands. He cannot see the suspect's hands. He continues to yell, show me your hands. Before the suspect droop. Before the suspect makes entry into that, thought it was all over. Our client believed he was going to surrender. And in that moment, in that split second, ladies and gentlemen, the suspect turns toward the client believed he was going to surrender. Suspect turns moment in that split second, ladies and gentlemen, the suspect turns toward the officer, looks in, fires in accordance with his training, one shot. After that, ladies and gentlemen, he fires no more shots. Ryan Rosser is the first person through that door right behind our client. Todd Barnhart on the SOFAS team, who hears my client radio his every move, arrives a short time after. David Youngless, U.S. Marshal team lead, who hears my client air everything on the radio, also responds to the scene. You're not going to hear from these guys from the government. The government's not going to call them to the stand. But like I told you earlier, we welcome our burden of proof. We welcome the defense of justification, and so you will absolutely hear from Ryan Rosser, Todd Barnhart, and David Youngless in our case in chief. You are going to hear the corroboration of what Jason is going to tell you, and more important, ladies and gentlemen, what Jason told the detectives in a voluntary statement that he provided before the prosecution got any of their evidence.
Overruled. Opening statement. Continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. This statement was given before Jason had an opportunity to see that video at Ferris and Carl. It was given before Jason had any type of review of any material. Listen for that corroboration, ladies and gentlemen. Listen as we call Ryan Rosser, Todd Barnhart, and Dave Youngless to the stand. Watch as they corroborate the chain of events that I just told you. If that's not enough, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to hear from an independent neighbor who, again, we as the defense will call to the stand, who hears our client give several commands to drop the weapon and identify himself as a United States Marshal. Now, outside of the witness corroboration that we will present to you, you are also going to hear that the physical evidence will corroborate the chain of events that I just told you. Listen to the physical evidence and the corroboration that it will provide. Video of Carl and Ferris that shows what I just told you. The fact that a gun was in fact found on the kitchen floor within an arm's reach of the suspect, not that a gun was in fact found on the, not in a holster. A coroner who is going to tell you that the wounds are consistent with that version of events that I just gave you. They are consistent with somebody turning toward the suspect. You're going to, second factor you're able to consider is whether the gunman, whether Mr. Goodson, the use of deadly force was reasonable, is whether the suspect was active, looked in the direction of, you're going to hear that Casey Goodson, you're able to consider, is the suspect non-compliant factor, whether Mr. Goodson was non-compliant. You'll hear testimony, ladies and gentlemen, that it took Casey Goodson 4 seconds of that suspect being, is uncontroverted. The fact that Casey Goodson was armed on December 4th, 2020. So the evidence will show that this decision to use deadly force when you analyze this factor is more likely than not reasonable. Now, the judge is going to tell you that you are to examine this case in your deliberations from the eyes of the time that deadly force was employed, not what Casey Goodson did or did not hear. Not say, you must put yourself in the shoes of Mr. Goodson on that day. Goodson. Reasonable police officer going through everything that Jason Meade did on that day, not Casey Goodson.